Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. You probably saw in your feeds, Wonder Woman 3 is basically dead in the water. There have been a bunch of news articles on most of the big movie sites. James Gunn, Warner Brothers, the new regime at Warner Brothers have basically canceled all plans for Wonder Woman 3 as it is right now. So I'll explain what's going on, what's changed, because there were a bunch of other big announcements, a bunch of big reveals about the future of DC movies just in general. It wasn't just about Wonder Woman 3. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. Of course, I'll do videos for everything as they continue to announce things because it's a developing situation. Like there was this big opening salvo as Wonder Woman 3 was essentially killed, and it's still going on now. Like it's still going to continue into next week, the week after. But you probably saw Gal Gadot's post about the anniversary of her being cast as Wonder Woman because she was getting hyped up about telling people about Wonder Woman 3, and it was the version that she had been working on with Patty Jenkins for the past couple of years. Like, I can't wait to show you the next chapter of Wonder Woman. And now that Twitter account, Poorly Aged Things, are posting it because, like, literally the day after that is when they announced that Wonder Woman 3 had been canceled by Warner Brothers and James Gunn. This is James Gunn's personal response to all the stuff that was posted about the big shakeup at DC. As for the story yesterday in the Hollywood Reporter, some of it is true, some of it is half true, some of it is not true, which is actually probably good news for a lot of you out there that got really worried about it. I don't know whether to laugh at this last little bit here too. He says some of it we haven't decided yet whether it's true or not, meaning that some of the current slate is undecided. Like they haven't completely decided what to do with Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman, Henry Cavill's Superman, even though it sounds like they will probably wind up continuing in some fashion. He goes on to say, although this first month at DC has been fruitful, building the next 10 years of story takes time and we're still just beginning. Peter and I chose to helm DC Studios knowing we were coming into a fractious environment both in the stories being told and the audience itself, and there would be an unavoidable transitional period as we moved into telling a cohesive story across film, TV, animation, and gaming. A big part of James Gunn's plans for the new DC universe is that everything is going to be canon with each other for the most part. Not every single thing, but most things across the movies, the TV shows, even the games, for instance. He goes on to say, but in the end, the drawbacks of the transitional period were dwarfed by the creative possibilities and the opportunity to build upon what has worked in DC so far and help rectify what has not. Meaning that some of the old stuff will continue, like I said. We know we're not going to make every single person happy every step of the way, but we can promise everything we do is done in the service of story, in the service of DC characters we know you cherish and we have cherished our whole lives. As for more answers about the future of the DCU, I will sadly have to ask you to wait. We are giving these characters and stories time and attention they deserve, and we ourselves still have a lot more questions to ask and answer. And in this post here, he uses a larger version of the classic Justice League. Like even Green Arrow is in the background, like he plans on doing Green Arrow in the movies, basically. So all the business suits sort of rushed out and were like, whoa, before you make any announcements, we have something to tell you. There's going to be a big change in the future of DC movies, and the version of the movie that you just gave us with this script isn't going to fly. The Hollywood Reporter was the site that actually broke the news about Wonder Woman 3 being canceled. They said that the project, talking about Wonder Woman 3 as it stood, like whatever the treatment, whatever the script that Patty Jenkins gave to them, did not fit with the new, but still unfolding, plans for the DC universe. That's like a nice way of saying that the movie that you gave us isn't going to fit with our plans, so we're not going to make that movie. And as part of the larger shakeup with the future of DC, a lot of people believe now that James Gunn plans on just basically getting rid of Snyderverse-related stuff, recasting a lot of actors, maybe keeping some of the old ones, because some of his own actors, like Harley Quinn, for instance, Amanda Waller, those are Snyderverse characters. But James Gunn doing a soft retuning of all the characters, the backstories, the way that everybody interacts and knows each other going forward so that it feels completely different, like a completely different vibe for all the characters. We know a little bit about what Patty Jenkins' Wonder Woman 3 was going to be. She'd been talking about it recently. I think Patty Jenkins has even been talking about Wonder Woman 3 for the past couple of years because Wonder Woman 1984 had been delayed for a while, so the movie has been done for a long time. But the next movie is a really good opportunity to course correct on some of the bigger things most fans had issues with during Wonder Woman 1984. One of the bigger stylistic choices that I think a lot of people were confused by is that if you watch Wonder Woman 1984, it's meant to be as if they made the movie during the 80s with 80s technology, but they're using modern day technology to pull it off. So the very Spider-Man looking way that she swings around seems kind of weird, or the way she runs really fast, the way they visualize that looked kind of weird. But they did that on purpose because they wanted it to look like it would have looked if they would have done a Wonder Woman movie during the 80s. But I think a lot of people just felt like it came off looking a little bit weird and a little bit silly. So I think when they get to Wonder Woman 3, stylistically, they'll try to make it feel like a more traditional superhero movie that you would expect to see in modern day. But they did announce that Wonder Woman 3 will be set in present day, probably the biggest change from the last two movies, which are period pieces. Setting it in present day also, as you guessed, allows them to do it as a crossover movie with other big Justice League characters, which has become the standard fare in big movie trilogies at this point. The whole thing with a trilogy is that you have to escalate with each movie. It has to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And sometimes the only way to escalate things in that final movie, it changes the formula with the last one, is to add a huge crossover character or do it as a team-up movie. The big but now is which characters she'd be crossing over with, because a lot of the other Justice League characters sound like they're not going to continue. We know that Ezra Miller will not be back. They're basically going to recast him no matter what happens. It sounds like Ben Affleck isn't going to continue under James Gunn. He did film a scene for the Aquaman 2 post-credit scene. Who knows if that's going to stay in the movie or if they'll take that out before the movie's released. And even though there's a solid chance that Henry Cavill could still continue as Superman, now there's a lot of questions about whether or not that's going to come to pass because of what was announced about Wonder Woman 3 in James Gunn's plans for sort of shepherding away the Snyderverse and starting fresh with something new. Remember the way he treated his version of the Suicide Squad movie? It was sort of a soft retuning of the characters, but sort of kept some of the things that came before. So just because you're seeing all this news about them moving past the Snyderverse, getting rid of that stuff, doesn't mean that they're going to get rid of every single actor that was cast within that era of DC movies. Gal Gadot was asked a bunch of questions about crossovers during interviews last week, just in general, just in the other DC movies, would you be showing up different places? She does have a cameo scene during Shazam Fury of the Gods, further complicating matters like if they're canceling Wonder Woman 3, but she's appearing in one of the upcoming movies early next year, how's that going to work? Her cameo scene is meant to be more in the tone of the Shazam movies, just a little bit more jokey, more comedic. Billy Batson has fantasies about going on a date with Wonder Woman, and she appears during that fantasy sequence. Like in the trailer, you see a scene where he goes to therapy and he's talking to PJ Burns, pediatrician, about his problems trying to be a superhero and just live that lifestyle. At some point, he fantasizes about her, and she appears that way. Make all the jokes about Billy Batson being a degenerate in real life because he's a teenage boy. If he had a fantasy about Wonder Woman, it would probably be pretty raunchy. But because the movie's PG-13, they're not going to actually show you what he would be fantasizing about doing with Wonder Woman. I'll just let you imagine that on your own. Everyone letting their degenerate flag fly. The other obvious connection between Wonder Woman and the Shazam characters is that they shared the same pantheon of gods. Wonder Woman is literally a demigod that's part of the Greek gods' pantheon. Most of the gods where the Shazam characters get their powers from are the Greek pantheon of gods or from the Greek mythology of gods. They'll get into that more during Shazam Fury of the Gods. As the title implies, they'll be fighting some of the gods where their powers come from. Then there's that whole Patty Jenkins Star Wars movie that she was working on, the Rogue Squadron movie. You may remember they announced it a couple years ago, made a pretty big deal about it at this big Star Wars presentation. Right after that announcement was made, the regime that was at Warner Brothers previously, who have all since either left or been fired, backed up a dump truck of money to Patty Jenkins so that she would fast-track Wonder Woman 3 and do that instead of doing Rogue Squadron. That's why there's no Star Wars movie coming out in the next year or two. That was going to be their next big movie they were going to release, and it was going to be their way of sort of sidestepping the issue of doing Star Wars Episode 10. Like, we won't do that yet, we'll do some other movie before we do the next big trilogy. So basically, Patty Jenkins has been working on Wonder Woman 3 for the past couple of years, per the agreement that she made with that previous regime, and she shows up to the new regime and they're like, you know what? We're going to pass. Like I said, though, this doesn't mean that she won't do Wonder Woman 3. It just means that whatever they were planning on doing for the movie has to completely change now, which means it's going to take a couple more years for them to fix that. Like, there will still be Wonder Woman movies. Obviously, James Gunn plans on using the Justice League. He was literally using Justice League Kingdom Come in his post about the plans he was making, and that was his way of telling everyone, oh yeah, the Justice League characters are going to be a big part of my plans for the next 10 years of DC movies. So the strongest pitches for the story of Wonder Woman 3 right now are, 1, still do it as a standalone movie, not a huge crossover movie, but you give her a female villain who's also either a god or at least as powerful as Wonder Woman, so you solve the big complaint of there not being enough action scenes in Wonder Woman 1984. Right now, the best options for another major female villain would be people like Cersei, who's another god. A lot of people have been talking about her for a long time. Then you have other characters like Grail, who is basically an evil version of the Wonder Woman concept. Number 2, you take the team-up route and you do Wonder Woman 3 as something like Wonder Woman versus a character like Black Adam, with some of the Shazam characters like Billy Batson getting cameos. Because Wonder Woman shares a lot in common with the Black Adam character. She's ancient, just like Black Adam, he's 5,000 plus years old, so she just has some common ground that she can speak with him on, like, look, I get it, I do, you want your loved ones back, but you need to move on with your life. But during Wonder Woman 1984, she started to replicate some of the other more complex abilities that Zeus had, like making things invisible without having to spell cast. Like she can kind of cast spells a little bit, use magical abilities without having to speak the words of a spell. So visually, their fights would be pretty cool, but most people seem to want a female villain for Wonder Woman 3. Then number 3, regardless of who they decide the main villain's going to be or what the story is, they should bring back Linda Carter's Asteria character. They hyped her up so much in that post-credit scene. She's supposed to be their greatest warrior, and she's still out running around the world saving people while this is all going on. So they will wind up doing Wonder Woman 3. Let me know in the comments what you want that to look like and which other characters you want to be in that movie. I will do a larger Justice League video about Henry Cavill Superman coming back and what's happening with the other Justice League actors, because we do actually know what's happening with some of the Justice League. Everyone click here for my Guardians of the Galaxy 3 trailer video and Easter eggs, and click here for my Deadpool 3 trailer video and Easter eggs. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.